The house had been perfect. A charming old cottage by the lake, with a wide porch and windows that let in the golden afternoon light. When Emma and Jason found it, they knew it was where they wanted to raise their daughter, Hazel. It had history, character, just enough where to make it feel lived in, warm. But some histories refused to be forgotten. Hazel had been a quiet baby, observant and curious. She would stare at the ceiling, at the corners of the room, as though she saw something her parents couldn't. Emma brushed it off as baby daydreams. Jason joked about her vivid imagination. It was harmless, until the day Hazel spoke her first word. It happened on an unremarkable afternoon. Emma sat on the nursery floor with Hazel, stacking wooden blocks. Then, without prompting, Hazel parted her lips and spoke a name, Daniel. Emma froze. The air seemed to shift, a silence settling unnaturally in the room. She searched for an explanation. A name from a book, a sound overheard. But no Daniel existed in their lives. Just a coincidence, she told herself. That night, the baby monitor crackled with static. Emma stirred, half awake, as soft giggles echoed from Hazel's crib. It wasn't unusual for a baby to wake in the night, but something about the laughter unsettled her. It was playful, delighted, like she wasn't alone. The next morning, unable to shake the unease, Hazel spoke with a neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, an elderly woman who had lived in the area for decades. When Emma hesitantly mentioned the name, the woman's face darkened, her usual friendly demeanor dimming. She spoke of a little boy, Daniel Carter, who had drowned in the lake 10 years prior. His parents had lived in the very house Emma and Jason now called home. He had been 5 years old. Emma's stomach tightened. Coincidence or not, something about it felt wrong. That evening, she watched Hazel in her crib. The baby cooed, arms reaching toward the air, smiling at nothing. Emma tried to convince herself that babies often engage with things unseen, but her mother's instinct prickled at the back of her mind. Something felt off. The mobile above the crib began to turn, slowly at first, then faster. The windows were shut, no breeze, and yet the tiny plush animals spun wildly, their shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls. Hazel giggled. Emma backed away, her pulse hammering in her ears. Jason found her minutes later, frozen in the doorway, unable to step inside. The days that followed were worse. The baby monitor hummed with static, whispers hidden beneath the white noise. Soft footsteps pattered across the floor when no one was there. At night, Hazel sat upright in her crib, staring at the darkest corner of the room. Her lips moved silently, forming words her parents couldn't hear. Emma began keeping the nursery door open at night, unable to bear the thought of Hazel alone in the room. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Sometimes, a toy car rolled across the nursery floor, moving as if guided by unseen hands. One night, Jason stirred awake to find Hazel sitting in her crib, her tiny arm trembling as she pointed toward the closet. The door creaked open an inch, just enough to reveal the yawning darkness inside, just enough to see something move. The house no longer felt like theirs. Something else had settled in, unseen, waiting. Desperate, Emma and Jason dug into the house's past. They found an old article about Daniel's death, how he had wandered too close to the lake, how his body had been found floating days later. But what chilled them most was the accompanying photograph. A little boy with wide, bright eyes that looked eerily familiar. Hazel's once joyful giggles turned into uneasy whimpers. Shadows deepened in the corners of the house. The baby monitor whispered even when turned off. At night, they heard the faint creaking of the rocking chair in the nursery, swaying back and forth with no one there. Then one night, Emma found Hazel sitting in her crib, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. She wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking past her. A chill swept through the room. The air grew heavy, thick with something unseen. The rocking chair in the corner moved, slow and deliberate, empty yet undeniably occupied. Jason grabbed Hazel, holding her close. Emma felt a breath, cold and faint, brush her cheek, carrying the scent of lake water. A whisper, just beneath the surface of her hearing, almost childlike, almost pleading. The whispers grew stronger over the following nights. A soft, insistent call just beyond perception, layered within the static of the baby monitor. Sometimes Emma would wake in the middle of the night to the sensation of something pressing against the mattress beside her. Jason, too, began seeing things, a shadow darting past the corner of his vision, a reflection in the glass that lingered a beat too long after he'd moved. The breaking point came when Emma woke to the sound of splashing water. She rushed to Hazel's crib, finding the floor soaked, as though someone had walked dripping wet across the nursery. The air reeked of lake water, and in the crib, tiny wet handprints surrounded their sleeping daughter. Emma and Jason couldn't deny it anymore. They had to leave. The house sold quickly, and they moved miles away, leaving behind whatever had taken root there. But sometimes, even in their new home, Emma would catch Hazel staring at a corner, smiling softly. Listening. One evening, as Jason tucked her into bed, she reached out as if touching something unseen, and whispered, "Good night, Danny,"